Welcome to Cozy Noah Vibes, where we listen, relax, and get sleepy. I'm your host, Noah. Thanks for listening. Get nice and comfy wherever you are because tonight's story is a long one. The Aeneid is an extraordinary epic poem, the Roman equivalent to the Iliad and Odyssey. It's a story that will take us from the ruins of Troy to the foundation of the Roman Empire. There will be adventure, love, divine interventions, wars, prophecies, and even a journey to the underworld. You'll also learn about Virgil, the author of the Aeneid, as well as the story's cultural and political significance. I'll be reading it to you, and it was written by our friend the French Whisperer, who has his own YouTube channel with lots of amazing sleepy content just like this. Now, my friends, make sure you're nicely settled in. If you've listened to the show for a while, you've probably heard me mention my own struggles with sleep that I've dealt with for most of my life. As tough as it can be to concede to those challenges myself, I do feel that I've gradually learned to deal with it better and better as time has gone on, and especially quite recently, my sleep has improved quite significantly, which I'm really grateful for. Of course, I can lean into my experiences and in doing so, hopefully help all of you to overcome any sleep struggles of your own. One thing that is for sure is that if you're lying awake at night with a head full of noise and a sense of frustration, I've been there many, many times, and I know that quite frankly, it's awful. So whatever brought you to this show, be it to find an antidote to your sleep struggles or simply for a source of comfort, just know that you are one of many thousands of listeners. Though I'd love it if we could all sleep soundly every night, I do think it's also reassuring to know that we are not alone when we're having a tough time of it. So with that being said, let's collectively enjoy a few soothing deep breaths. Draw in a calming, full breath, hold at the top and gently release, letting go of worry or tension. Breathe in again, hold and let it go. One more time together. Breathe in calmly, hold and exhale any worries or tension as you begin to drift into a deeper state of relaxation. Allow yourself to be reassured that you are one of many that will be listening along tonight. And now, it's time that we turn to our story. So let's go back thousands of years to a city called Troy. This is where our story begins. It all began in Troy at an important moment during the Trojan War. The Trojans thought that they had won their decade-long war against the Greeks. But in reality, they were in danger of losing everything. You may know the Trojan War as it was told in the Iliad and the Odyssey. All the kings and cities from Greece gathered to attack the powerful city of Troy on the other side of the Aegean Sea. But Troy was well protected behind its walls and it was defended by heroes and even supported by some of the gods, like Poseidon, Neptune to the Romans, Aphrodite also known as Venus, and Apollo. The Trojans resisted. It seemed the city would never fall as the Greeks could not break its fortifications, and the attackers were losing patience. So after 10 years of fruitless attacks on Troy, King Odysseus or Ulysses came up with a plan. The Greeks built a large wooden statue of a horse on wheels and suddenly overnight, They abandoned the beach under the city's walls, or so it seemed. Only one man stayed on the beach as the Greeks pretended to sail away. His mission was to convince the Trojans that the Greeks had abandoned the fight, which meant that the Trojans had won the war. He also wanted them to think that the horse was an offering to Neptune, who was the god of the seas and the god of horses. But this was obviously a trap. The wooden horse was hollow, and inside it was King Ulysses and a group of warriors waiting for the Trojans to drag the horse behind their walls. The Trojans hesitated. The Greeks were nowhere to be seen, and what risk was there of accepting a wooden statue, a gift to one of their gods? The Greek soldier tried to convince the Trojans that accepting the gift would make Neptune look favorably on them, enabling them to conquer Greece. But after 10 years of devastating war, the Trojans had their doubts, especially a priest named Laocoon. He saw through the Greek plot and urged his compatriots to destroy the wooden horse immediately. When they ignored his warnings, Laocoon took matters into his own hands and threw his spear at the horse. But then two serpents sent by the gods suddenly emerged from the sea and devoured him. The Trojans saw this as a punishment for disrespecting the offering to Neptune. But the gods hadn't sent the snakes to help the Trojans. In fact, they had decided that Troy should fall. But of course, the Trojans didn't realize this. Impressed by this divine intervention, they dragged the statue behind their fortified walls, and they began to organize festivities to celebrate their victory. The Trojans were oblivious to threats, thinking nothing could happen behind their walls. So after nightfall, the armed Greeks emerged from the wooden statue where they had been hiding all day, and they silently opened the city's gates. Outside, the Greek army had returned and now stood ready to enter the defenseless city. As these events were unfolding, one of the Trojan princes and heroes, Aeneas, was sleeping at his house. Aeneas was of the highest Trojan nobility. His father, Anchises, was a prince of Troy, and his mother was the goddess Venus herself, who always made sure to protect her son. Aeneas had fought bravely throughout the war, protected by his fighting skills and his goddess mother, and he had survived that night as the Greeks were starting to invade the city and slaughter the Trojan gods. Aeneas was fast asleep, and as he slept, the Trojan hero Hector appeared to him in a dream. Hector had recently died by the hand of Greece's most formidable hero, Achilles. In the dream, Hector's ghost urged Aeneas to immediately flee the city with his family. The gods had made plans, and they had decided that Troy would fall. But in their negotiations, Venus had obtained protection and a future for her son. A future so brilliant and extraordinary that the name of Aeneas would become immortal and his deeds would be celebrated for centuries. But for his fate to happen, Aeneas needed to escape the destruction of the city. At first, when Aeneas awoke, he joined the battle and tried to fight the Greek invaders. But then he saw the reality of the situation. Trojan warriors were falling one after the other, and the city was engulfed in fire and smoke. After witnessing the death of Priam, the old king of Troy, Aeneas accepted that the war was lost. Then his mother Venus appeared. She led Aeneas back to his house where his family was anxiously waiting. His son, Ascanius, his wife, Creusa, and his father, Anchises. Aeneas' family all accepted the need to escape and discreetly made their way towards the city's gate through the chaos that Troy had become. When they reached the open gates, Aeneas realized that his wife Creusa was no longer with them, and he went back to the city to search for her. But instead of finding Creusa, he encountered her ghost. The ghost of Creusa told Aeneas that he should follow his destiny. He should travel west where he would go through struggles, temptation, and perils. But ultimately kingship and a new royal spouse awaited him. After losing his city and his wife, Aeneas was devastated, but his father and son had survived, and with inspiration from his divine mother, Aeneas found the strength to rally a few other survivors and flee from the burning city. The Greeks were now celebrating their triumph, but the survival of Aeneas and his companions were the seeds of a new empire, one that by the will of the gods would surpass anything the Trojans or even the Greeks could have ever imagined. Over many generations, the creation of Rome would be the phoenix rising from the ashes of Troy. After their escape from Troy, the survivors prepared to set sail. They had built a fleet of ships and decided to accompany their new leader Aeneas on his travels west. This group of refugees was being closely watched by the gods. On their side were the protectors of Troy like Neptune, Venus, and Apollo. Others were neutral or even hostile, like Juno or Hera to the Greeks. Juno was the queen of the gods and the wife of Jupiter Zeus. Under the eyes of the gods, Aeneas and the other survivors began their wanderings across the Aegean and Mediterranean seas. To begin with, they landed in Thrace, near Troy, where they found the last remains of another Trojan warrior and hero, Polydorus. Then they arrived on the island of Delos, a holy sanctuary of Apollo. Delos was welcoming and peaceful. The group was tempted to stay there after the exhausting ordeal it had just gone through in Troy. But Apollo told them to leave, as this was not the place where the gods intended them to build their city. So Aeneas' group sailed to Crete, where they thought they had arrived at their destination. They started building a settlement, the future city. But as soon as they began to build, they were struck with disease. Then Aeneas had a dream where Apollo told him that this was the wrong place and that they should leave. Cit left with no other choice. They abandoned the settlement and sailed on their next stop on an island west of Greece. They encountered a harpy, a monstrous half-bird, half-woman. The harpy ordered them to leave her island immediately and made a prophecy. Aeneas and the other survivors would reach Italy one day in the future, but they wouldn't find it until they were driven by hunger to eat their own tables. With this gloomy prophecy, the group resumed their wanderings, this time landing in Epirus in the north of Greece. Aeneas' group were not the only survivors of Troy. Ventus can join us. Before they begin, find a comfortable position. Others had managed to escape and travel to Epirus, that the survivors had begun to build a city that replicated Troy, hoping it would give them a second home and cure their homesickness. This group of Trojans included Andromachaicus, Andri, and Helenus. He was the son of King Priam of Troy, and he had the gift of prophecy. He revealed that not only would Aeneas' descendant prophesy, he would also rule the entire world. Epirus was not the promised land for them, and so the group set sail once again. As you may remember, not all the gods who watched Aeneas's expedition. Others addition and to choosing can join us. Before they begin, try to talk about position.